we want the technology, we want the speed and the scale of the technology, but we also want the human judgment that has to be calibrated or built into the governance mechanism. So we have the best of both the worlds. That's the challenge really in today's cybersecurity scenario. That how do you govern these tools without slowing them down? I'm going to pause here and once again go back to our expert, Dr. Khera. What are your thoughts in this regard? And please share what you guys are doing with your platform, with your tools.
So the idea would be, how do you ensure that the AI doesn't go rogue, right?
Exactly.
So this is interesting. And if you look at the news, we look at the US government taking off Fable 5 because somebody's jailbroken it, pointed it to what Anthropic calls a narrow jailbreak, not a universal. So narrow is basically, there's a small portion. You see a lot of fear in these type of technologies, right? How do you handle it? Now, from my experience, what we do is, as you rightly said, we take a step back and we build compliance into the tools. So if you look at what happens in the Anthropic case, the system prompt, somebody went in and jailbroke the system prompt and was able to see what command would have been executed. And they were trying to bypass this command at the system prompt so they could jailbreak it and get the model to do things, right? So maybe if you go back to Anthropic case, they have the constitutional, which is basically how the AI must behave, like your morals value. And then they have the system prompt, which is each knowledge that gets executed before you execute anything, before you run a command or you ask something. So this is two levels of what Anthropic did. Now, if you look at the government again, they became very skeptical about the hijack. It could pose a lot of risk. So I think the risk is very real. I think that you have a gun, right? You could use it to protect yourself or you could use it to hack other people's network. For us, what we are basically doing is our system is very strong in what we do in terms of making sure that at the last level of compliance, we have the human orchestration layer. So for us, what we are building is we're putting that human orchestration. So if the AI, for example, finds that something is vulnerable, it's going to attack this to show you that it can attack this. And we know that it could have some impact. It's a high vulnerability. We will break it. We'll stop it. It has to come and ask human, get the human to approve.
Welcome to the Cybersecurity Readiness Podcast Series with Dr. Dave Chatterjee. Dr. Chatterjee is the author of the book Cybersecurity Readiness, a holistic and high-performance approach, a Sage publication. He has been studying cybersecurity for over a decade, authored and edited scholarly papers, delivered talks, conducted webinars and workshops, consulted with companies, and served on a cybersecurity SWAT team with Chief Information Security Officers. His work on proactive cybersecurity has been featured on USA Today. Dr. Chatterjee has been a tenured professor at the Terry College of Business at the University of Georgia. As a Duke University visiting scholar, Dr. Chatterjee teaches in the cybersecurity programs at the Pratt School of Engineering.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cybersecurity Readiness Podcast Series. I'm your host, Dave Chatterjee. To set the stage for today's discussion, let me use an illustrative example. Imagine a hospital network. Every year, the hospital hires a team of human security experts to try to break into their systems, a classic penetration test. The team works for 2 weeks, follows established checklines, and reports back, saying, "We found 3 vulnerabilities, you are in decent shape." Now imagine adversary, a well-funded cybercriminal group. They deploy a frontier AI model against the same hospital. The AI does not work from a checklist. It reasons adaptively, chaining together subtle misconfigurations across dozens of systems simultaneously, probing paths no human team would have the time or bandwidth to explore. Within hours, it finds a critical flaw that the annual pen test missed entirely: an exposed Apache server misconfiguration, and maps a path to sensitive patient records. The hospital wasn't careless. Its people weren't negligent. But the tool it relied on had a structural ceiling that the attacker's tool did not share. This is the core dilemma this episode addresses. Frontier AI has fundamentally shifted the offense-defense balance in cybersecurity. And most organizations are dangerously unprepared for it. Not because they lack effort, but because the tools they still rely on, like annual manual penetration tests, are structurally incapable of keeping pace with AI-powered attackers. The same model capability that helps defenders find vulnerabilities before attackers can do can also help attackers find them even faster. And the race to harness it is accelerating on both sides. My guest today has been working at this frontier from the inside, building an LLM agnostic attack validation platform powered by a symbiotic AI architecture that channels frontier model reasoning into a structured offensive loop with human escalation at the high judgment points. Dr. Varin Khera, co-founder and chief technology officer of SecStrike and head of Asia Pacific at Yarix, is my honored guest today. Varin, welcome to the episode. I apologize for the rather long introduction, but you will have ample opportunities to discuss, make corrections, whatever you wish to share to enhance overall awareness.
Thanks. It's great to be here. So maybe I do a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that why don't you share some professional highlights and anything else that you deem relevant before we dive into the heart of the discussion. So please go ahead.
So thanks again. So a little bit about me. As you mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CTO of SecStrike. So in SecStrike, we're building a platform we call EchoStrike. Okay. So what is this? Is something we call symbiotic penetration testing platform, like what you mentioned. So this is an AI-driven model agnostic and with human judgment built into the loop. So anything that the platform deems that it needs human judgment, it goes to the human. We'll discuss more here. So before this, I spent about a decade at Nokia, finishing as head of cybersecurity pre-sales for Asia Pacific and Japan. Along the way, I co-founded and exited a regional cybersecurity firm. I hold a doctorate in information technology, with much of my research and peer review work focused on AI and cybersecurity. So today I lead Asia Pacific for Yarix. It's part of our group from Italy. So what makes this moment generally interesting for me, Dave, is, and why I want this conversation is because I sit on both sides of the arm race. I build offensive AI and I sell defensive services to enterprise through Yarix arm to try to stay ahead of it. So I'm on that both side and I'm hoping to share my experience on what the both sides sees. Yep.
Phenomenal.
Thank you very much. Yep.
Phenomenal. That is truly a unique perspective, a unique vantage point, and I'm so honored that you decided to come on my podcast and talk about it. So let's provide the audience with a few clarifications, because we will be throwing out these terms such as frontier AI model and this model and that model. It's important to kind of explain a little bit. So a frontier AI model refers to the most advanced cutting-edge AI systems available at any given moment. Models operating at or beyond the current boundary of what AI can do. These are large-scale systems capable of complex reasoning, multi-step planning, and adapting to novel situations with minimal human guidance. Think of them as the state-of-the-art, the best that exists right now, before the next generation surpasses them. For instance, we have heard of Claude, ChatGPT, Grok, and many more. And these platforms, AI platforms, keep evolving. And that's how you learn about whether it's 4.8 or whether it's 5.5 and so on and so forth. So thus, the word frontier signals that these episodes are constantly pushing the boundary, entering new territories. And that's what makes this phenomenon extremely concerning and exciting. Like Varin said, both the attackers and the defenders have access to this technology or to this evolving technology. And this technology can be used to detect and exploit vulnerabilities, and also can be used to proactively thwart attacks. We like to call it the AI arms race. It's a matter of who does it better and faster. So I turn back to Varin. Varin, based on your experience, how would you characterize this AI arms race?
So I think a very good way to categorize this is like this, right? If you look at in a typical setting where people understand, in your house, for example, you have a burglar who comes into your house and he's got a set of keys. So he's got a set of keys, he follows the house, and he knows that this set of keys will break into this house. So that's the typical analogy. Now, that is what we call a typical AI, the typical old AI. When we talk about AI, what they used to do with this AI is they used to do a lot of playbook. Okay, so that's traditional AI. Now, when we look at frontiers AIs, these next generation model like OPAS, like ChatGPT's next generation 5, what we are seeing is, think of the analogy like this. Now, this time the burglar is coming to your house, but he actually has all the keys. So what he can do is he basically, he knows all the keys that can open to any lock. So he's a locksmith. So he's basically a locksmith. He comes into your house, he sees the door, and he says, well, I can build the key to open this door. So that is exactly what the frontier model is, you see. So you have to think like this. The old model relies on playbook, but the frontier models build the playbook as it scales. As it's actually doing the orchestration, doing the work, it's thinking like a human being. It's thinking that, well, if I see this particular scenarios, like this particular door, which key do I build? And it builds the key. And then it not only builds the key, it orchestrates the whole attack. So what we call a security chain attack. I will go through this as we discuss, but that's in my perception what a frontier model is. And that's how I feel, the AIs are moving into. In a good analogy that I hope it brings it very clear and easy for people to understand.
I love that. I love that metaphor. Love that analogy of the locksmith entering a house with every possible lock combinations or with the capability to unlock any kind of a door. I think that's well said. So as we were just discussing, frontier AI has fundamentally changed the offensive threat landscape. However, research finds most organizations have not caught up. Varin, would you agree with that?
From experience, I completely agree.
What are you finding out there?
So what we are finding is, and this is coming from a very recent case that we are working on, right? It's a typical large network. You could say it's a telco network, right? A large scale operation. What we see is that these type of network, because it's large, what they do is they do a scan, maybe a yearly scan. Okay. Right? I mean, when they do yearly scan, what happens is the minute that of penetration testing work, for example, that they've done is actually approved and gone in, with the frontier model, it's already expired because it doesn't work anymore. So we are seeing that, Dave, as you mentioned, we're seeing that quite a lot. I mean, organizations are not being able to adapt, right? You think of it again, I like an analogy. It's like what is happening today is you're inspecting a house, right? And take that example of the burglar. You call an inspector, he comes in and check, well, the house is completely perfect. And then he goes back. But you look at the burglar who's a locksmith, he can come in, break into the house. So if you're inspecting the house once a year, it doesn't work anymore. And that's what we are actually seeing in the field. Because the frontier model and this AI development has come very fast, I think it's very difficult for organizations to move and to adapt in time. So this is the challenge I see right now in the field, and I'm working to address it with my clients.
Good to hear that. That's a reaffirmation, a validation of what I'm also seeing out there. In fact, recently I was recording an episode with an expert on GRC. And essentially, the theme of the discussion was kind of similar to what we are discussing today. And that is We were talking about the compliance phenomenon, and she said that, unless you engage in real-time audits, real-time testing, you can never be sure that the company is in compliance, is in real compliance. The moment you're engaging in periodic audits, periodic testing, like you said, the annual penetration testing or semi-annual penetration testing, things can change significantly between the last report and the next report. And so the organization's vulnerability goes unchecked, unmonitored. It's a false sense of relief that organizations often will have when, let's say, their GRC dashboard has a green signal light on. They think that, okay, we are in good shape. Unfortunately, that's not the case. That's more often than not, that's not the reality. So the challenge, in my humble opinion, is you have to embrace a real-time, a continuous approach to detection, to remediation, validation, and more. To be able to do that, you have to deploy technology such as the AI capabilities. However, if these tools are not properly calibrated, if the guardrails are not correct, then we have another problem where the technology goes rogue and can cause huge catastrophic failures or damages with cascading effects. So, yes, we want the technology, we want the speed and the scale of the technology, but we also want the human judgment that has to be calibrated or built into the governance mechanism so we have the best of both the worlds. That's the challenge really in today's cybersecurity scenario. That how do you govern these tools without slowing them down? I'm going to pause here and once again go back to our expert, Dr. Khera. What are your thoughts in this regard? And please share what you guys are doing with your platform, with your tools.
So the idea would be, how do you ensure that the AI doesn't go rogue, right?
Exactly.
So this is interesting. And if you look at the news, you look at the US government taking off Fable 5 because somebody's jailbroken it and has pointed it to what Entropic calls a narrow jailbreak, not a universal. So narrow is basically, there's a small portion, so you see a lot of fear in these type of technologies, right? How do you handle it? Now, from my experience, what we do is, as you rightly said, we take a step back and we build compliance into the tools. So if you look at what happens in the Entropic case, the system prompt, somebody went in and, jailbroke the system prompt and was able to see what command would have been executed, and they were trying to bypass this command at the system prompt so they could jailbreak it and get the model to do things, right? So maybe if you go back to Entropic case, they have the constitutional, which is basically how the AI must behave, like, your morals value. And then they have the system prompt, which is each knowledge that gets run or gets executed before you execute anything, before you run a command, right? Or you ask something. So this is two levels of what Entropic did. Now, if you look at the government again, they became very skeptical about the hijack. That it could pose a lot of risk. So I think the risk is very real. I think that you have a gun, right? You could use it to protect yourself or you could use it to hack other people's network. But for us, what we are basically doing is our system is very, very strong in what we do in terms of making sure that at the last level of compliance, we have the human orchestration layer. So for us, I'm taking a step back, and EchoStrike, what we are building is we're putting that human orchestration. So if the AI, for example, finds that something is vulnerable, it's high, it's going to attack this to show you that it can attack this. And we know that it could have some impact. It's a high vulnerability, we will break it. We'll stop it. It has to come and ask human, get the human to approve. So that's what we are trying to do, right? For us, basically...
Can I interrupt you for a second? I hate to interrupt my guest, but I think you bring a very important point that under certain scenarios, the system will have to revert to a human for approval. So my question here is, what happens if that human is not immediately available to provide that approval? And you can address it now or later, but I just wanted to put that in your head that I've had this discussion before in a different context. And so one of the concerns that has been raised is, yes, we want human intervention provided the human is readily available, because otherwise we are going to once again experience the slowdown.
So what we do is the system that we build, it learns. So for example, the first time the human needs to approve, it's going to definitely take some time, right? We are building, and this is a moving research. It's something that we're addressing. We're trying to address this. But at the beginning, once it learns what the human does in this particular scenarios, when it sees this particular scenarios again, it behaves what the human does. So if the human did approve it or the human stops it, it learns. What companies want is just to show that it's possible to attack, just to list out the scenarios, but not to perform the real attack. So this is what the human instructed. This is our governance that we put in. So again, our system learns this and behaves like this. And we call this the Crimson Nexus, right? The institutional knowledge for us. So it learns, it behaves, and then next time it sort of does like what it has to do. So yes, there is delay, but that is the trade-off. It is a trade-off that you have when you bring in the human. But as it learns, as it matures, it knows what it needs to do. That's how we are addressing it.
Okay, that's interesting. You talked about Crimson Nexus, and that brings to mind the EchoStrike example that you were sharing with me during our planning meeting. Can you go into some detail? I think the listeners would love to hear about it.
Okay, so the idea of what we're trying to build is called symbiotic, right? Before I go there, what is symbiotic? Symbiotic is multiple, if you go to symbiotic, the word is multiple organisms thriving, living together, thriving together, working together, right? So the idea of what we're trying to build here, the concept is similar. It's basically a technology that allows AI, multiple AI agents, we are agnostic, any agents, to work together with a human. Right. So, and then the system, of course, AI working together with human in the loop exists. But where this differentiate is every time the system gets to work, it gets smarter because everything goes back to Crimson Nexus. Right. And the Crimson Nexus, what it's trying to do is every time it sees a problem, it then looks at this problem and says, well, I saw this problem in my database. So it sees a fingerprint and it sees how the AI attack or, how the AI would perform certain vulnerability tests on this fingerprint. It then takes this fingerprint in the database. And then next time it sees the fingerprint or the action that if it requires a user, it learns, it goes to the Crimson Nexus execute. Now what we're getting here, Dave, is we're getting a system that's very fast because in a way it's going back to the playbook, but it's not a playbook completely. So when it sees an attack pattern, it executes very fast. It doesn't need to go to LLM. Because my personal take is that LLM tokens are going to get more and more expensive. You're going to keep wanting more and more frontier model. So they will get more and more expensive. And you've seen that with Fable, right? So the idea would be, how do we streamline this process? So that's how we built Crimson Nexus. So it's a database that learns, that expands, and that takes the fingerprint. So I know what you're going to ask me as the next question. How do I ensure that that's safe? I know that because I get that a lot. Now, this is interesting. Dave.
Before you continue, by the way, I'm absolutely enjoying your discussion, your perspective. We want to clarify for the sake of the audience, Crimson Nexus happens to be EchoStrike's persistent knowledge engine, right? And EchoStrike is the name that is given to the AI platform that your organization has developed. Is that correct? Can you just clarify these things, please?
Yes. So the platform that we developed, it's called EchoStrike, right? Now, in EchoStrike, there's a couple of components, right?
Okay.
One is the Crimson Nexus. That's the learning database. Okay. I don't like to bring a lot of names here, but that's the learning database, the institutional database that grows. Then we have the Red Engine. Okay. The Red Engine is something that's the execution, the orchestration engine. Okay. Then the third thing we have is the Recon Pulse. It's what looks at the threat on the internet. It looks at attack surfaces, right? And to glue all this thing up, so the Red Engine and the Recon Pulse work together with a thing that I've patent pending. It's called the ATV, Adaptive Threat Validation Engine. So this is the whole concept, right? It consists of a few of these things and they work together. And in each of these, there's a sub-modules.
Okay. That helps. That helps. Go ahead. I did interrupt you. You were going along a certain track.
Okay. So coming back to Crimson Nexus, I know that a lot of the questions we ask is, how do we keep data and how is it stored and how is it safe? So the idea with Crimson Nexus is when every time we have, again, the analogy is you have a consultant, because we grew from a consulting company, right? You have a consultant. Okay. The consultant works on 10 different projects, 10 different clients. How do you trust the consultant? You get him to sign the NDAs, right? But at some point, you trust him. He knows all the 10 clients. How do you trust him? So the idea is we build something like an NDA into Crimson Nexus. We build an encryption. So anything that's stored in the Crimson Nexus, it doesn't store the target. It just stores the fingerprint, the method, not the IP, not who you are, just the method. And then when it stores things, it encrypts this. It encrypts this and it ensures that, even though people come into the database and tries to break the fingerprint, of course, it's encrypted with a key. If they break the key, all they see is the fingerprint and the method, right? So again, to use the Crimson Nexus, it's a back-end system. So it's not exposed. It's a back-end system that the EchoStrike, the red engine, talks to. So the idea would be you have to break in the red engine to go to the Crimson Nexus that's inside. Of course, it's not as secure, but the concept is you have to know the key that the red engine used and the Crimson Nexus used to be able to access it. And once you access it, even though you access it, whatever means that you have, there is nothing that is stored about the work, the IPs or the things that identify a client or a network. So that's how we keep it secure. Now, is it fully secure? There's nothing that's fully secure today, right? So It's a work in progress. We are experimenting this. We are bringing in stronger encryptions. We are bringing in stronger fingerprints matching. So it's an evolving phase. But right now, that's how we do it. And it seems to satisfy a lot of the customers' requirement at this stage.
Very good. That's great to hear. While you were sharing the workings of the platform that your organization and you have built, that is an adaptive, I'm going to use my own words, an adaptive AI platform to detect and remediate different types of attacks, different types of threats. I'd like to bring a framework into this conversation. And it happens to be a framework that I developed and introduced in my book, Cybersecurity Readiness, a holistic and high-performance approach, which was published by Sage in 2021. The framework is called Commitment, Preparedness, and Discipline Framework, CPD framework. And it's a framework on cybersecurity governance primarily, but it has been applied in the context of AI governance as well, because it's hard to separate the two anymore. If you have AI, you have to be concerned about cybersecurity and vice versa. So why am I bringing this up? I think at the end of the day, somebody listening to this conversation and would like to invest in a truly adaptive, effective AI platform that will enhance the defensive capabilities of the organization, they will need to make a case to the leadership. And for the leadership to buy into that case, what needs to exist is a highly security aware and a security friendly culture. The purpose of the CPD framework, the bigger purpose, is to create and sustain such a culture. So let me be a little more specific. From a commitment standpoint, in this context, organizations must recommit to validation cadences calibrated to AI-augmented threat velocity and not annual cycles. As we have been talking about this, frontier AI is accelerating the speed and sophistication of offensive operations. Adversaries with access to these tools are not waiting for governance cycles to catch up. So there has to be a high level of commitment, a hands-on approach as far as the leadership team goes to evaluate their existing security capabilities and make the necessary adjustments. If that means investing in a new platform, so be it. Now let's get to the next dimension of this governance framework, which is preparedness. Coverage gap that manual testing cannot close are now exploitable by widely accessible AI. And this should have come through by now during our conversation. So therefore, continuous validation infrastructure is a preparedness imperative, not premium option. And organizations have to recognize that and move in that direction if they want to raise their level of preparedness. Finally, the third anchor of the CPD framework is discipline. Governance frameworks must be durable against a rapidly shifting capability landscape. Discipline means building oversight architecture now, before the next capability class arrives. So I just thought of bringing this framework in to maybe help pull together what we are trying to discuss, because we can have the best possible discussion or the greatest discussion on the latest tools and their capabilities. But equally important or more important is, how do organizations make a call on whether they need that tool, when, and how should they bring it in and seamlessly integrate it with their existing infrastructure, and thereby grow their defensive capabilities. And that's precisely what the CPD framework strives to offer. But anyhow, Varun, I'll turn it back to you. Your thoughts, your reactions.
I did glimpse through your CPD book, very, very, very well written. I think when you talk about the CPD, I think one of the issues that would always come up is, and again, we're seeing this as a live case. I mean,
right.
A lot of the organization, they feel that cybersecurity is like an audit, and you audit it once a year. And now the cybersecurity team is going and saying, well, we cannot audit this once a year because the threat is moving very fast.
True.
Now, the question I see this is, Dave, is if you go to the board and says, well, because Fable came out, we need to do something, you get thrown off, right? So it's how you put this. The board does not understand technology. The board doesn't want to say, well, there's a new tool, I need to do something about it. That's not what they want. What the board wants to understand is, what's the risk structure? And I've seen this through one of our customers. They wanted to invest in continuous penetration testing. It's a live network, it's a large network. So they went to their risk committee and explained to the risk committee that, well, this is the penetration testing work, the offensive security work we've done, and it has expired, it's not valid. And they showed the risk that still remains, how the risk still remains. When the risk committee went up to the board, they threw this as a board's problem. Does the board wants to close the risk, or does the board wants the risk open? Now, to close the risk, what do? We need to make an investment now. And that investment is on new technology. They don't block cybersecurity, but they don't understand cybersecurity. So it's a framing that's very important, that's I see. And in my particular case, the board has approved an emergency budget to go ahead, procure this continuous penetration testing tools, AI augmented, agnostic, and bring it in, and then show the result back of how the risk has decreased.
Exactly.
That's really I see how we position to the board. Yeah.
Exactly. And absolutely. And that includes kind of setting some metrics, using the metrics to show effectiveness. Because there is a challenge here with cybersecurity investments. It is very hard to prove the ROI. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes requests for more money, requests for investing in new tools and technologies fall on deaf ears, because the leadership team are driven by the organizational goals. And, in general, humans don't want to change the course or do something different if they don't feel the need for it. It's like the natural human mindset to be actually reactive and not proactive. Going back to your analogy of securing the home, yes, we buy home insurance, and God forbid if there is a fire or any kind of burglary, some insurance protects some, not totally. However, are we always proactive in our approach? For instance, do we ever take stock of what we have in the house and have a family discussion that if there were to be a fire, let's assume the people are not at home, which is the best thing that could happen. What is it that we can't afford to lose that's in the house? Any artifact, any precious items? And what have we done about it? So that proactive mindset needs to be there. But often humans, we don't think that way. We are like, everything is fine. I've got insurance. Why should I worry? And, what's the likelihood that there's going to be a burglary? What's the likelihood there's going to be a fire? So we just leave it at that. And that is exactly what happens with organizations. They are aspiring for bigger goals. Cybersecurity is often treated as a pain. that needs to be addressed. It's a compliance factor. Let's be compliant somehow. Let's check the box so that we can get that contract. We can qualify to apply for certain contracts. But it is often not considered as a strategic enabler. It is not often integrated into the overall value proposition. And that's where there has to be a change in the leadership mindset. If you look at cybersecurity and AI governance as strategic capabilities, in the long run, organizations will find that they are ahead of their competitors. And because of their superior governance, they're attracting more market share, their products are more desirable, and so on and so forth. So therefore, I would encourage listeners to take a very holistic approach to these governance discussions because there is more to it than meets the eye, and they need to really connect the dot between governance and the top line and the bottom line. And I promise you, they will see a difference. So let's get back to Varin again. Varin, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to do something that I haven't done before in any of my podcast episodes. I plan to do it, but I haven't done it. So we're going to do a rapid fire segment. So let's start with the first one. The most dangerous misconception organizations have about AI-driven threats right now is, what is it, according to you?
Machine isn't the danger. Removing the human accountability for it is the danger.
Thank you. Fair enough. Number two, the governance principle most AI security vendors are ignoring is what?
Accountability has to live inside the model.
Interesting. Number three, the development that changes the defender calculus most significantly right now is?
AI is moving from executing known attack to discovering new one. And it's autonomy. It's discovering it at a rapid pace.
Fantastic. Finally, in 5 years, the organizations that navigated this transition well will have done one thing differently. And what is that one thing?
Govern for the category, not the model.
Fantastic. As you were responding brilliantly to these one-liner questions, what comes to mind is the reality that readiness in the age of frontier AI is not about slowing down the technology. It's about building governance fast enough to govern it. That's really what it is. So anyhow, as we come to the close of this episode, by the way, Varin, it has been extremely illuminating. Thank you so much for your time and contributions. But now let's try to wrap it up with some key audience takeaways. So I'm going to start with one, and then maybe you can talk about the second one, and we can go from there. So the first one that comes to me immediately is frontier AI has fundamentally changed the offensive threat landscape. And most organizations are yet to catch up. And we actually talked about that. So that's checked off. The second one, the AI capability gap between the attacker and the defender is real, and it demands immediate action. We talked about that as well. The third one, manual penetration testing is structurally insufficient, not just slower, but categorically limited. I'm going to let you take it from here.
And the other thing is, I think, making a good case to the board, making a good case on how you present this, right? Don't lead with technology, lead with business, right? What's the impact of the business? For anybody today, the takeaway is you have to understand not just prompting on how to use AI with a prompt. I mean, everybody knows that. But maybe you want to go into how multi-agent orchestrate. How does it work with multi-agent orchestration? How does AI machine learning intersect? What is the state, right now, the architecture of the offensive security? I think these are areas that I think it should be a key takeaway, right? That, not every time you can build a system and have it go fully autonomous. Sometimes a little bit of a break is necessary. And that's the human in the loop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As we close out this discussion, it brings back to mind the very popular PPT lens that is used to analyze implementation effectiveness. And PPT stands for people, process, and technology. To finding that right fit, having the right people, having the right processes, having the right technology, and making them come together or have in an appropriate alignment is the incredibly difficult challenge or task that organizations continuously face. Today, they are facing it in the context of adapting, implementing, assimilating AI-enabled platforms. So this challenge goes on. There is not a one-stop solution. You keep learning, keep evolving, and keep trying to do the best you can. Looking the other way is not the option. Assuming everything is fine and we will deal with it when we have to deal with it, that's again not a wise proposition. And that's why we have these discussions. So you pick up on things, see what's relevant, what's applicable to your organization, and do the best you can as an organizational leader. So Varun, this has been truly a pleasure, but any final words for the audience?
I think there maybe one final thought is cybersecurity before was always an afterthought. I have worked with clients who build digital transformation. They don't do cybersecurity transformation. So it goes digital, but without cybersecurity. So it's like, a house built without a good layer, right? That thinking does not work. Cybersecurity has to be the forefront of your thinking at the front level. So there is no more digital transformation without cybersecurity transformation because it goes hand in hand, right? So I think that's what I feel. And I hope that we've shared enough knowledge to the people to understand, we are in an age where technology is moving so fast, but, you have to give cybersecurity one of an important criteria on how you would, bring it into your whole ecosystem of how you design things, how you architect system. Yep. So that's what I feel.
Well, thank you again, Varin. It's been truly a pleasure. Hope we'll have an opportunity to catch up again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks.
The information contained in this podcast is for general guidance only. The discussants assume no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content of this podcast. The information contained in this podcast is provided on an as-is basis with no guarantee of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness. The opinions and recommendations expressed in this podcast are those of the discussants and not of any organization.